Bueno, continuamos si les parece.
Okay, let's carry on. Let's start voting.
Vamos un poco retrasados.
We are starting a little bit late.
Vamos a votar en primer. ¿Tienen todo?
First of all, you will have your cars, don't you? First of all, point 10. Sorry, can we have some quiet, please? Okay, let's vote on the first 10, 11, 12, and 13 reports. Documents. So we'll vote on these jointly. Is everybody there? Is everybody ready?
Wait, it's not working again. Pues sí. Entonces, pasamos a votar.
Okay, let's vote. Can we have some quiet, please? Let's start voting, shall we? 10, Common Organisation of the Markets in Fishery and Aquaculture Products. 11, Sustainable Exploitation of Fishery Resources in the Mediterranean. And 12, Common Fisheries Policy. Absolute majority there.
Vamos a ver, hace falta explicarlo. Este tema.
Sorry, we need to explain this. This is Article 70 that's been reviewed through interinstitutional. Sorry, if we could have some quiet, please.
Es que si todo el mundo.
If everybody's talking, we really can't understand each other. And that's where you're having your doubts, I think. So if you could please listen, I think things will be clearer. To start interinstitutional negotiations, the committee has to adopt a formal draft on this issue by an absolute majority of the MEPs, which includes a negotiation mandate and the composition of the negotiating team. You have that document. You know what the title is, who the rapporteur is, etc., and what date it was approved on. What we would like is to vote on initiating interinstitutional negotiations for these three procedures that I read out, 10, 11, and 12. Is that okay? Any doubts? Any questions? No? Good. Let's start the vote on these three. Off you go.
Finaliza.
Finished.
Aprobado por los.
So, 19 in favour, 1 against, 1 abstention, absolute majority required. So, unfortunately, Ms. Olivini, this didn't work out. But it doesn't change the final result. Let's carry on, if you agree. This is number 13, report 13. By Mr. Kuhn.
Sobre medidas técnicas de control aplicables.
Technical and control measures in the Skagerrak and amendment of regulations, etc., etc. Consider amendments. Let's start then, shall we? Number 10. Amendment 10. Off you go, close.
Aprobada.
Carried by 1 vote. Amendment 11, off you go.
Cierra.
Vote is closed. Carried. Amendment 12, vote is open.
Cierra.
Vote is closed. Carried. Amendment 55, vote is open. Closed. Vote is open. Carried. Amendment 13, vote is open. Closed. Carried. 14. Votes open. Closed. Carried. 15. Votes open. Closed. Carried. 16. Votes open. Closed. Carried. Compromise 1. Votes open. Closed. Carried. Compromise 2. Votes open. Closed. Votes open again. Closed. Carried. Compromise 3. Votes open. Closed. Carried. Let's carry on now to 56. Votes open. 56. Closed. Rejected. 19. Amendment 19. Votes open. 19. Votes open. Closed. Carried. 62. Votes open. Closed. Rejected. 63. No, I apologize. 21. 21. Votes open. Closed. Rejected. 67. No, that falls. 22. 22. Votes open. Closed. Rejected. $70. 70. Votes open. Closed. Carried. Now, compromise 4 in 2 parts. First part, first and third paragraphs, and the second part, well, it's fallen. So just one part. Votes open. Closed. Carried. $75. Votes open. Closed. Carried. 76. Votes open. Closed. Carried. 24. Votes open. Closed. Carried. 77. Votes open. Closed. Rejected. Compromise 5A. Votes open. Closed. Carried. We don't vote on 5B, so $84. Compromise 6, please, then. Votes open. Closed. Carried. Compromise 7. Let's open. Closed. Carried. 34. Amendment 34. Oh, votes open. Closed. Carried. Amendment 35. Open. Closed. Carried. 103. Let's open. Closed. Rejected. 36. Open. Closed. Carried. 104. Open. Closed. Rejected. 105. Open. Closed. Rejected. 106. Open. Closed. Rejected. 37. Open. Closed. Carried. 38. Open. Closed. Carried.
8.
Compromise 8. Votes open. The vote is closed. Carried. 114. Vote is open. The vote is closed. Rejected. Amendment 1. Votes open. The vote is closed. That's carried. 40. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Carried. 2.
What's this one?
Sí. Yeah, it's different. Yeah,
So?
so dos.
Enmienda 2.
Amendment 2. The vote's open. The vote is closed. Carried. 42. The vote is open. The vote is closed. That's rejected.
Enmienda 71 fue aprobada. What's happening with 71? Fall. 74. 74 plus.
74 plus.
So, we go to 46. 46. 46.
46.
Comienza.
The vote is open.
Cierra.
The vote is closed.
Aprobada.
That's carried. 7. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Rejected. 47. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Rejected. Compromise 9. The vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried. Amendment 8. The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Rechazada.
Rejected. 49. The vote is open. The vote is closed. And that's rejected. 9. The vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried. Now, the proposal as amended. The vote is closed. That's carried. And the draft legislative resolution, the vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried as well. Congratulations, Mr. Kuhn. One abstention, indeed.
Pasamos al siguiente. Votación, que es modificación.
The next vote is amendment to Council Regulation 812, laying down measures concerning incidental catches of cetaceans. In the Fisheries Amending Regulation 88/98. Mr. Romeva. Amendment 5. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Let's do that again. You went too fast for me. Amendment 5. The vote is open.
Cierra.
The vote is closed. Carried. 2. The vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried. Amendment 1. The vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried. 3. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Rejected. 4. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Carried. The legislative text as amended, those in favour. Sorry, the vote is open, I beg your pardon. The vote is open, the vote is closed. That's carried. And the draft legislative resolution, those in favour. Sorry, the vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried with no votes against, one abstention. Well done, Mr. Romeva. Now we move on to the 2011 discharge. General Budget Section 3, Mr. Torvalds is our rapporteur. Let's begin with Amendment 1. The vote is open.
Cierra.
The vote is closed. Carried. Amendment 2. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Carried. Amendment 3. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Carried. 4. Vote's open. The vote's closed. Carried. 5. The vote's open. The vote's closed. It's carried. The opinion as a whole. The vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried. Well done, Mr. Torvalds. Now, item 16, 2011 discharge, Community Fisheries Control Agency. Mr. Salavrakos is rapporteur for opinion. Two amendments. Number 1, the vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried. 2, the vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried as well. The opinion is amended. Those in favour. Sorry, the vote is open. The vote is closed. That's carried with 1 abstention, no votes against. Well done, Mr. Zalavrakos. That brings us to the end of voting time. Now, the next item is, if Mrs. Dodds agrees, she's rapporteur for 5 and 6. I would propose that we take them together and have a joint debate. If our rapporteur agrees, it will be more efficient and quicker. Are you happy with that, Mrs. Dodds, as an idea?
Debatimos entonces.
Okay. So we'll take 5 together. We heard a Commission presentation on this already. We've also had 2 exchanges of views on the proposal. What we're going to do today is have a look now at our rapporteur's draft documents. But I'll ask the rapporteur to introduce both items. A bit of order, please, colleagues.
De acuerdo. Señora Dodds.
Mrs. Dodds, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would have prepared or preferred to have a very brief initial discussion on the alignment report, followed by a more substantive discussion on the second report, which is a much more detailed and practical report. And I think that the reasons for this will become clear as I try to make some distinctions between the two. In terms of the first report, which is the alignment report, first of all, I want to record my thanks to the Parliament Secretariat for their help in advancing this piece of work. I find myself in a fairly unique position in terms of presenting two consecutive draft reports on the same subject. The first report is the latest instalment in the Lisbon alignment process, and members will be familiar with much of the language used. The second report, which I shall come on to, seeks to amend the same regulation in a more practical and fundamental manner. Therefore, I prefer if we try to focus on the distinction between the two, particularly in light of the Commissioner's comments this morning as well. In my reporting to committee this morning, I would have to also say that there is a series of overlaps in the wider issue of long-term management plans, and perhaps this is a discussion which I would like the committee to have at this particular time, and which will perhaps clarify some of the issues and the views of committee around the issue. The decisions made by the EU Fisheries Minister on the 18th of December 2012 have the potential to make the alignment of the long-term cod plan the most controversial in this series of initiatives. It also has the potential to actually give us a little bit of space and time to work with the Irish Presidency in perhaps presenting some resolutions to the issue as well. I believe it is worthwhile considering the time frame that led to this decision. Regulation 1342/2008 establishing the long-term cod plan was agreed on the 19th of November 2008 and published on the 18th of December that year. Apologies. The plan represented what was a dramatic step in efforts to rebuild cod stocks in the northern waters. This plan included a clause whereby it would be reviewed after 3 years of implementation. Consequently, it was reviewed by the Scientific, Technical and Economic Committee for Fisheries, which published their evaluation of multiannual plans for cod in the Irish Sea, Kattegat, North Sea and west of Scotland, following their July 2011 plenary meeting in Copenhagen. While accepting that after only 3 years of the plan's implementation, it was premature to conclude on the plan's immediate term impact, it did, however, conclude that this plan is not delivering reduced fishing mortality and additionally, in many areas, does not have stakeholder support. A plan which stakeholders support is more likely to succeed because the stakeholders' actions are needed to contribute to its success. Support of the plan should also, in theory, lead to their acceptance of responsibility to fulfil their obligations, and I think that that is a very, very important conclusion. This would lead me to conclude that a new plan was needed and that this is accepted by the scientific community. It took the Commission a further 14 months to publish their proposed amendments to the plan. This was delivered on the 12th of September 2012. This delay, combined with the perceived urgency to address some of the problems associated with the plan, encouraged the Cypriot Presidency to table a proposal on the 12th of November 2012 that sought to address specific issues relating to the setting of the cod tax and effort controls in the areas covered by the plan. In effect, the Presidency proposal copied and pasted Articles 9 and 12 from the Commission's proposal of September 2012. In pursuing this course of action, the Council referred to Articles 43.2 and 43.3 of the Lisbon Treaty, which they interpret as giving them competency in the area. In other words, they regard the setting of tax and the effort levels as being without the remit of the co-decision process.
Slowly, please.
Oh, sorry. As we know, that's an interpretation that Parliament has rejected, and which some in this committee are calling for the matter to be referred for a judicial opinion. I am keen to avoid an overlap with the next agenda item, which is a much more substantive discussion on the actual amendments needed to deliver an amended plan. But I do think that we do need to have some discussion here of where the committee see this as going. As I said in my submission to the Commission, I am against going to court at this particular time. From having discussions with Member States, I actually think that Member States and Council would prefer this to go to court. Going to court effectively puts this into puts this on the long finger, as we would say, and means that the Council would see no reason to actually move from their position. And I would urge this committee not to fall into that particular trap, while leaving the option of a judicial judgment open at some particular time. I would also like to say that I would be particularly keen to see a proposal coming from the Irish Presidency, along with the Commissioner's proposal from this morning, that might find some common ground in creating a pathway for this particular alignment report to progress. And I would like to hear committee's views on this particular aspect of it. In terms of the actual amendments, I have sought in the amendments to strengthen the position and clarify the position of Parliament and the scientific advice within the alignment process. And again, I would be keen to hear committee's view on this particular issue. I look forward to our conversation.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, señora Dodds.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Dodds. Mr. Wałęsa.
Dziękuję, panie przewodniczący.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make a reference to the resolution from item 5 on our agenda. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the rapporteur for her report. It would be impossible to disagree with her amendments. I also welcome the fact that Mrs. Dodds has extended it to include the consultations and stake for scientific advice and advice coming from regional advisory councils. The European Commission should be bound to use scientific advice and to seek the opinion of a relevant RAC before it takes a decision to set the new values for mortality. So I'd like to thank the rapporteur for this. Regarding the report from item 6 on our agenda, well, during the previous meeting, we all agreed that this regulation is yet another example of cod management plans which are not in tune with the reality on the ground. Therefore, the plan does not yield the expected result, i.e. the improved status of the cod stocks. Its review, as per the recent scientific advice, is very important, and the rapporteur has prepared amendments to the revised plan, which I'd like to take a reference to. Amendment 4. which fine-tunes and stipulates that meeting one rather than all the criteria will make it possible to exclude the fishing effort. And also I'd like to make a reference to Amendment 6, which will allow for simplified administrative procedures. I support them because they make sense. Yet, what we still find missing is having a better language regarding Article 11A, especially item C. It would be interesting to hear the European Commission's opinion regarding Amendment 5, which is also being looked at by my experts, and hopefully we'll hear something about it today. But of course, I will continue to submit subsequent amendments which are based on my remarks and reservations. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Tak for det, herr formand, og jeg vil også godt takke ordføreren.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the rapporteur for the work on the report. We have had some difficulties with the circumstances here because the Council before Christmas removed some important provisions from this piece of legislation regarding the TAC. I think the rapporteur has done the right thing by looking both into the contents, into the Council decision, but also insisting that we as a Parliament need to be involved in these provisions and how they're worded. So I support Amendment 2 and 3 regarding the procedures for the TAC. We need flexibility for the scientific advice and the way the quotas are set up. I also believe that there are other methods for achieving the MSY goals and reducing quotas, both for those fish stocks with documentation and those without. This could be better catch methods and better equipment. I also support Amendment 8 and 9, or I'm positive towards them, which is in line with the Danish provisions for transferable quotas. And this both applies to fully documented fisheries and others. The Commission will try to deal with the acute problems in the long-term plan for cod. And I support that this is adapted, but I also want to emphasize that we need a general revision of all this. I'm looking forward to the Commission's plan for mixed fisheries. I also hope that we'll have a clarification of the division of competencies between Council and Parliament in this context when we look at long-term plans. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
Thanks, Chairman. Chairman, what the Council did in December was absolutely outrageous. And, you know, there is no point, I think, us shouting at the Council the way we were doing this morning. I mean, we've made the point. But if we continue to shout at each other, we become entrenched. And as Mrs. Dodds said, if we pursue them to the European Court of Justice, that is the best possible excuse for them to sit back, maintain their concrete position and do nothing. Now, I heard during our debate with the Commissioner this morning, Ulrika Rodust was saying that we should do both things. We should look at a compromise, which the Commissioner had suggested, and which I think now is an opportune time to discuss that idea. But at the same time, we should also go to the court. But again, you know, there will be no discussion, no debate from the Council on any compromise if we at the same time go to the court. They will use that as their get-out-of-jail card free, and there will be no alternative. So I think we should, Commissioner Damanaki told us there is another almost identical case that the Commission has gone to the court over. We should allow that court case to develop and see what comes of that. And in the meantime, let's talk about a potential compromise. I understand that following the lunch that Simon Coveney, the Irish President in office, held a couple of weeks ago, the French, who are taking the hardest position on this, have come back with a letter suggesting that they don't want to see any completely hard and fast mechanised approach to setting tax and quotas. But, you know, they're willing perhaps to talk about any other issues around that. Now, that is the first chink of light. That would indicate to me that the French are beginning to soften their position. Carmen is nodding her head. maybe you're not as optimistic as me, but I think we should look at that as a potential sign of light at the end of the tunnel and see if we can develop some compromise. And frankly, the compromise that the Commissioner spoke about this morning is something we discussed a year ago in this committee, where we would have an initial say in the creation of the framework for a multi-annual plan, but after that we would leave it to the Council to implement any reviews. And I said to Mrs. Damanaki this morning, and I'll repeat it now, that seems to me eminently sensible, because if we get involved in the regular review process, the co-decision process slows the whole thing down. And while, you know, I'd love to have Parliament taking part in the regular review of multi-annual plans, it's not practical, it's not logical. So if we have a complete say in the initial drawing up of the framework for the multi-annual plan, to me that is a beneficial compromise that we should think seriously about accepting. And if we have the Commission working with us as our ally to facilitate that compromise, I think we could see an end to this logjam. So I really hope the committee will think hard about that.
Gracias, señor Steven. Señora Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Sisson. Mrs. Levin.
Thank you very much. Basically, I have a question to the. Thank you to the rapporteur for all her hard work. It's a really tough situation to try to do both the Lisbonization and alignment, and then also amending the regulation and keeping the two files apart. But I didn't understand if we're going to discuss only the Lisbonization, or both. Both now, because you.
Apologies. Colleagues have, in their responses, discussed both. I would like, before we get into too substantive discussion on the substantive report, to just hear the general view on the Lisbonisation process and the alignment process. And I'm very happy to come back on the more substantive one, although I have noted down some of the comments of colleagues in relation to particular amendments on the substantive report.
Gracias.
Okay, if I understood the chair correctly, we should take it all in one. So basically, I'm going to ask you a few questions about the substantive amendments to the regulation. On the Lisbonization file, I think we're on the same line, and we support what you're doing there. On the actual amendments, there's quite a few that are really making big changes from the Commission's proposal. One being Amendment 3 on what to do where scientific advice indicates that there should be no directed fisheries at all. And the Commission's proposal is a 25% reduction or other measures. And the rapporteur, you're proposing that TACs may be set, but only for bycatch. And I know that there are some stocks, for instance, the cod stock in the Kattegat, that is really on the brink of extinction. It's less than 1 or a couple of % of what it used to be in the 1970s left of the stock. And presently it is being caught as a bycatch, but I think that that's really not acceptable, considering that the stock is really on the brink of extinction. So we might have another view than the rapporteur on that. And I'd like to have some explanations on the Amendment 5, where the Commission proposed a limit of 300 meters, so vessels carrying out fishing activities on a depth greater than 300, and you had quite another proposal there, and obviously you haven't explained your proposal yet, so it's just a question of why you changed that. But basically I'm not going to ask any more questions because I think Mrs. Dodd, you will explain it when you have the word later on, so thank you.
Señora Fraga.
Mrs. Fraga, please. Well, my question was on the planners. I don't have any other question. Well, I'd like an answer on this. I think it's important and interesting, this, is that I know that in the Council, the blocking minority there, at least, blocking all these plans, what they don't want, under any condition, is for this Parliament to have anything to say on the Harvest Control Rule, HCR. That lays down the maximum and minimum amount between which mortality of important species, and it also lays down the tax. Between the maximum and the minimum, we are not going to have a position. That's what we're being told by the Council. That's that would mean maximum flexibility. But the HCR comes under co-decision. And I think basically here we're saying that the Council has full reign to establish whatever tack it wants. And I don't think we're going to accept that. The actual rules, the legal basis, doesn't allow Council to do that either. What does the Council want here? Well, I think we have to be very clear as to whether we agree to give this to Council or not. I don't think we are. If they agree that to go to co-decision, fair enough. But I don't agree with the decision as it stands. If everybody else is in agreement, okay. But the problem is, I would say, the Harvest Control Rule problem. If she agrees with that, no problem. I don't agree with giving free rein to Council to lay down all these tax, because they're basically political in nature, those tax. I mean, if we don't want that in this Parliament, what do we want?
¿Alguna otra intervención?
Anybody else? Mrs. Dodds?
Just a couple of things that I would want to come back to. I completely agree with Struan Stevenson's analysis, and I think a majority of the committee will agree. We cannot continue to have this Mexican standoff with each other. It is not in the interests of sustainable fish stocks. It is not in the interests of the industry. It is not in the interests of the political direction that this Parliament and this committee should be taking. In other words, I believe that we are sent here to do things on behalf of our constituents, and that is what we should be doing. So I think that there has to be some mechanism to find a compromise. I think we have a window of opportunity with the Irish presidency. I am a little disappointed that they so far have not brought forward what they see as the bones of a compromise in relation to this particular issue. However, I don't think that this will end up with everybody getting their own way, so that, you know, we have to have some kind of mechanism to deliver this. In the amendments that I have put in the alignment report, I have actually also not giving the Council free rein to set tax. I have actually reinforced the need to refer to the scientific community and the view in relation to this. I think that we need to be careful and we need to find a way forward. I think it may end up in the court. I think that we should use the window of opportunity that the Irish presidency gives us. I look forward to a substantive discussion with them when they have a proposal to bring. But I do stress for those from the presidency that are here today that this is not an issue that we can continue to keep putting off, to keep talking about in committee, to keep raising everyone's concerns on the issue, but while simply letting it sit there, because the Council are content to let it sit there. We need to sort it out. And I don't think that court action immediately will be the way to sort it out. It will simply mean that we will still be talking about this 2 years down the line. With your permission, may I come on to the more substantive report, which I think is very important. And I thank colleagues for the comments that have already been received in relation to that. Can I say, controversial as what happened in December undoubtedly is, we need to, in preparing for the future of cod stocks, the future of the industry and the communities that rely on that, I think the one thing that we should be saying in this committee is very, very much that I see that this amendment to the long-term cod plan as an interim measure. And it must be an interim measure because we need to replace this with a mixed fisheries or a multi-species plan. And so therefore what we are doing now, what I'm seeking to do now, is to provide some clarity, but also to provide some buy-in, and above all to establish the principle that the scientific advice on these issues is hugely important and needs to be regarded in all things. Recently we had comments from ICES that, after a number of years of increasing fishing effort, the last 5-6 years have seen a decline, and that is contributing to an improved outlook for some cod stocks, and that is to be welcomed. But we still have much, much more work to do, as Isabella has said, with the cod stocks with which she is familiar. So it's very, very important. The purpose of the amendments is to improve on the position that the Commission proposal has actually brought to us in their amendment of the 2008 plan. Isabella has looked at Amendments 3, which she feels she can support. I look forward to having a discussion with you around those amendments to see if we can actually reach a compromise position in our subsequent meetings that will actually improve upon the position that we already have, even within the amendment that I have produced. I am happy to have that discussion. I think it is very important actually in this committee that we reach the highest level of consensus on this report that we can possibly have. I think that is a very important signal to the Council in relation to this particular report. So I look forward to having a further discussion with you on that. I also have tried in the amendments to extend cooperation between fisheries scientists and the industry. For too long, I actually think that there has been too much of a standoff and an us and them position in relation to that. So I have tried to do that. Advice which reduces cod catches, reduces discards, while retaining a sustainable catch of the target species is really a win-win for everybody and something that we should try to work to. Amendment 6, I think, is an important one, where I have looked at the fact that a gear which has been through the STEP process and which results in a cod catch of less than 1.5, where this has been developed in one member state, I actually think that it is logical to extend this to other member states. So I would ask for your consideration around that. On top of that, and I think that perhaps in our discussions with the shadows on this particular issue, we may want to introduce some clarification so that some member states are actually more adept at taking regulation than others and identifying what needs to be done with it. And I think we may want to put in some further clarification in that particular one as well. Others have referred to amendments 8 and 9 in relation to fully documented fisheries. I think where these projects have been trialled, they've been successful. This is an initiative that we should encourage and we should seek to become a more norm. Amendment 5 relates to fishing activity carried out at a depth greater than 300 metres. The Commission did not explain why 300 metres was selected, although I now understand from some member states that there may be objections in relation to this, and it's maybe one that we need to work through a little bit more. Colleagues, this has been an extensive piece of work and a controversial piece of work in many ways. We want to have a really good substantive amendment to the 2008 plan so that we can, in the interim, provide greater clarity. I think it's really important that this committee also has a consensus opinion that it can bring forward to Council. I think that's an important signal to Council that the committee is united in what it does in relation to the amendment of the plan. And I look forward to further discussion with you on it and to your amendments and to the subsequent discussion that we have. The purpose in doing this is to get greater clarity, to provide for sustainable fishing and sustainable stocks, and I think that we can all work together to actually achieve that. Thank you.
Gracias, señora Dodds.
Thank you, Mrs. Dodds. Anybody else? No? Commission? Tessie?
Thanks, Chairman. I would like to thank the rapporteur for both draft reports. It is a very tough situation, I have to say. And I will not mention the interinstitutional impasse on multi-annual plan because you have already discussed with the Commissioner, so you have that direct information from her on what we consider will be the next step. But just to react to the comments that were ongoing now, I will underline that whilst the Parliament and Commission decide on whether to lodge a case with the Court, we should not wait for a judgment. We need to, in any case, to make progress on the multi-annual plans and to find the good way to solve the institutional stalemate. I will not comment any more on this. Now, I take into account the technical amendment that were supposed. I can react going into a deep discussion on each amendment, but take into account that as Ms. Dodds proposed, there will be more clarification. Maybe we can do in a more technical way, just to be able to deepen the analysis, the justification for the different amendments. I would like just to mention that, of course, it was the intention from the Commission to simplify at the maximum level the regulation, the current regulation. So some changes that we have proposed it's true, are very technical, but were based on the experience drawn from the implementation of the plan from several years and the discussion that we had with the industry and the scientists. So our proposal were going into simplify at the maximum level the implementation. Now we have the feeling that some amendments, but we need maybe just to clarify in a more deepened way the content of the amendments, maybe sometime will complicate the implementation of the amendments. So I can go into deep explanation now, but maybe we can just have a more technical discussion with Ms. Dodds to understand the different amendments. What is sure that we have, I think, the same objective, so it's to provide more clarity, to provide for us the sustainable fisheries and the sustainability of the stock, so we can work in this direction in a more deep and detail together. Thanks.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mrs. Dodds. Mrs. Dodds, would you like to say anything?
I'm happy, content to leave it, and my door is open. Colleagues can come and talk.
De acuerdo, pues muchas.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed. Let's finish that debate on that. Tabling amendments. 25th of February you have until at midday. 25th, midday. Well, before we close this issue, the Vice Chair asked me as to whether the legal services could actually come up with analysis, explanation of the case that was referred to by Prime Minister Damanaki. Also what Mrs. Dodds referred to. I'm not sure if they could say anything. If you do have something to say, please take the floor now.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. It's a very crucial moment, actually, in the respect of the Lisbon Treaty that we are going through in these present times. And actually, I think that this particular file, for which Mrs. Dodds is rapporteur, falls in perfectly now, because we have already had clear signals from the Council what it is going to do and what it already has done also, because on the 19th of December, by means of a regulation number 1243 of 2012, the Council already adopted unilaterally, on the legal basis of Article 43, paragraph 3, by its own, the provisions that were contained in the Commission proposal for the adjustments to the multi-annual plan for cod, containing the Articles 9 and 12 in the Basic Act, and which are also the object of the amendments numbers 3 and 10 in Mrs. Dodds' report. So now we are facing a situation where there already is in force a legal act, which legality is doubtful, of course, but a legal act already in place, adopted by the Council. So these are already applicable legislation in the Union, the Articles 9 and 12 as amended by that Council regulation. So we actually, strictly legally speaking, we haven't any negotiation margin on those provisions anymore. The only solution, if we want to have our rights to be respected, that we also have a say concerning how these tax are calculated in a situation where scientific advice isn't sufficient, or what automatism applies to the cutting down of tax in those situations, we have to go to court, because the Council has already made its mind. It has adopted a legal act, so they simply can't even negotiate anymore on those items. So we don't have any other solution than go to the court. And also, what has happened inside the institution, this is public information, I can say it in public, is that since the coordinators of the Fisheries Committee had discussed the item, then on advice from the Jury Committee, the President of the institution has decided to give a mandate to the legal service to sue the Council in court, to bring an action against this particular Council regulation that has adopted these two provisions in the Commission proposal that we are now studying. So what we are now doing, according to the instructions from Mr. President of the institution, is that we are drafting our application to be filed in by the 15th of March at the latest. And I also know from my counterparties in the Commission that the Commission Legal Service is doing exactly the same, and that is so there will be a joint action from the two institutions, and this is also what Mrs. Damanaki said this morning, that confirmed that her legal service is also taking this type of action. So, summarizing briefly, is that we are already facing fait accompli, as the French say. So there is already an established legal act which completely disregards us and doesn't give us a say. If we want to have us heard and respected by the Council in the future, we don't have any other alternative than going to court now. So, but if we don't mind that we are, let's say, overruled, that we weren't given a say, then good, that's also a political choice which is fully, of course, possible. But legally speaking, if we want to have the treaty respected, so there is already a decision by the institution to go to the court. And then to Mr. Stevenson on the former case that Mrs. Damanaki was also referring to, that's also a joint action by the two institutions, by ourselves. We were the first to lodge our application, and then the Commission did the same last February, March, against the Council, once more, unilateral decision to decide on future access to Venezuelan vessels to the French Guianan waters to fish there, which in our view was a typical international agreement, and in the Commission's view also because at the first stage the Commission proposal was presented for the consent of the Parliament, and then the Council once more unilaterally changed it into an instrument on which we all only were consulted, which we refused. We didn't give our output in consultation, and then the Council finally adopted it without having any opinion from the Parliament, once more on the legal basis of Article 43(3) and without our consent. So this is about the external dimension of the common fisheries policy. That's not about the multi-annual plans, but it is, of course, about the application of Article 43, to which extent Parliament has to have a say, but in that particular setting, when it comes to giving consent or not for the Union entering into international relationships in the field of fisheries. So that's slightly another matter, of course, of the same treaty articles, but in a different setting, not that of multi-annual plans. So I think that these two actions that we already have introduced last year against this Council decision on the Venezuelan vessels, and now the new one that we probably are lodging according to instructions from Mr. President Schulz. So these two actions will complete each other in a very useful manner, so that we finally will have guidance from the court on this. And one last remark, if I still may make it, Mr. President, is that I wouldn't, as a lawyer, I wouldn't feel that we are entering into a trap even if we go to the court, because now, as I tried to explain, we are already forced in a situation where the Council has made its mind. It has unilaterally adopted an act. So if we want to have our rights respected, we need to take an action to that sense. But of course that doesn't prevent to have political negotiations in parallel. They are highly appreciated, of course. So legal action in court, that's the normal practice of the institutions, that sometimes they simply have to seek guidance from the court afterwards, and that doesn't, of course, paralyze or hinder from having political negotiations on the same matters in different contexts. Thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. Mrs. Dodds and then Mrs. Lövin. Mrs. Dodds first.
Thank you. What our colleague has outlined is clearly a lawyer's interpretation. These are political institutions, and there has to be a political path that can actually negotiate around this. It may well be that there is a side-by-side parallel track approach to this that might be a legal action and a political negotiation. I do think, and I still think, that we need to have some time to allow the Irish presidency to bring forward a proposal that will break the logjam. I have spoken to representatives from member states, different member states from my own. They are not unhappy to see the Commission and the Parliament take this to court because it simply allows them to stall any kind of political process in relation to it. And I will be interested to see what actually does transpire by the 15th of March.
Señora Lövin.
Mrs. Lövin.
I just wanted to make a very, very practical question. So I think the two-track solution here is the one that we should follow. But my practical question was, if we initiate a court procedure, could we interrupt that?
Yes, Mr. President, of course we can abandon a court action later on, but there is a fixed time limit that can't be continued, and it comes to an end the 15th of March. So by that day we have to decide if we maintain the instructions that has been decided inside of the institution and lodge an application, which we will do unless we are explicitly told to the contrary, and then after it has been introduced, we of course can abandon it as a result of a political choice. But
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Well, the decision I thought we adopted very clearly. I mean, this two-path approach, the courts, if we don't solve anything, but we could also try and come in with political discussions. The decision, as I've understood it, is that we had adopted some instructions very clearly, and we'd have to go back to that committee to get anything else. In the coordinators' meeting, we went a step further, and we said that we were going to look at all the decisions that called into question this principle. And I think this was the criteria we used. What the legal services have said, I think they basically rubber stamp what we've said to defend our power, to defend the way we are working, using all the different steps we've made, every gesture. We've even unblocked the Gallagher report vote. And we will be working with the Irish presidency to, I think it wants to clear up this issue. But they're two parallel paths. They won't necessarily interfere the one with the other, but I think the criteria we have are clear, and that's where it should be unless we decide something else. Anyway, that's that. Next point, the last one this morning. The date for tabling amendments for the two Dodds reports, the 25th of February at midday. Now, 18, access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilisation in the Union. This report is from Mr. Hodgson. I can't see him. He hasn't come. But what we're going to be doing today is to listen to a presentation from a representative of the European Commission. Mrs. Lövin wants the floor.
Just to inform you that Mr. Hodgson apologizes very much that he couldn't be here, but I've got some notes and some questions from on his behalf, so I will take them later.
De acuerdo.
Okay. Well, let's give the floor to the Commission first to make their presentation. Go ahead.
En nombre de la Comisión. Sí.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. This proposal in front of you, this proposal for a regulation aims at implementing at EU level a protocol to the Convention on Biological Diversity called the Nagoya Protocol because it was negotiated in Nagoya in Japan. This protocol relates to access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilization. So it's called Access and Benefit Sharing, ABS. And this ABS aspect is one of the three pillars of the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity. The other two being the conservation of biological diversity and the sustainable use of its components. The EU and all its member states are parties to the CBD, and the EU and member states signed the Nagoya Protocol expressing their political commitment to swift implementation and ratification. On the other hand, the Council and the European Parliament repeatedly urged the Commission to propose measures for the EU implementation and ratification of the Nagoya Protocol. And measures were formally presented in October 2012. This proposal for a regulation is the result of a wide consultation process. So we consulted EU stakeholders. We also held bilateral consultations with other parties. We held conferences and workshops. And also we commissioned an impact study. This study includes sectoral studies to develop an EU baseline, and I will come back to this later. And on the basis of all this information, the Commission prepared an impact assessment. I would like to highlight some characteristics of this EU baseline, so based on this impact assessment. This EU baseline served as benchmark for analyzing impacts and for identifying the best performing implementing measures. So basically, the main characteristics are the following. First, genetic resources are used for a wide range of purposes by a wide range of actors with different interests. Second, multiple actors intervene at different stages of the value chain, collecting, basic research, applied research, product development, etc. 3, future interest in research and development on genetic resources is likely to be stable or increasing, while demand for in situ access will be declining in most sectors. 4, the use of traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources appears of limited importance and is expected to decline further. 5, in situ access is mostly done by university-based researchers and scientists affiliated with ex situ collections. 6, commercial users rarely collect in the wild. 7, ex situ collections play a fundamental role in the EU genetic resources value chain for both non-commercial and commercial users. And 8, ABS best practices exist particularly upstream in the EU user chain, and currently they are less relevant for downstream activities. So basically, it's the main characteristics of this baseline coming from this impact assessment work. The impact assessment focused on a number of issues. First, different measures were analysed with particular focus on the access aspect and the user compliance aspect of the protocol. Our starting point was that in maximising research and development opportunities on genetic resources, we would maximise benefits in support of conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. The main criteria guiding our approach, in accordance with better regulation principles, were first, EU compliance with the protocol, second, ensure legal certainty for users, 3, enabling conditions for research and development, 4th, to ensure correspondence of measures with existing practices, 6, consider impacts and costs in the value chain, particularly focusing on academic researches and SMEs, and finally, to ensure administrative burden and cost as reduced as possible. On the basis of all these elements, these characteristics, we drafted this proposal for a regulation. I would like now to highlight the main features of this proposal. There are basically 6 important elements in this proposal. First, a general obligation on users to exercise due diligence. Second, to establish a system of EU trusted collections. 3, the recognition of best practices. 4, the monitoring of user compliance and checkpoints. 5, union platform and access to enable discussions, exchanges, etc. And 6, enabling a collaborative approach to implementation. That is a basis for further cooperation and collaboration with third countries and other regions. So I would like to focus on some of these features. First of all, on the due diligence obligation. It's the key provision of this draft regulation. Basically, according to this obligation, all users would be obliged to exercise due diligence to ensure that genetic resources and traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources were accessed in accordance with applicable legal requirements and that, where relevant, benefits are fairly and equitably shared upon mutually agreed terms. In addition, all users would need to seek, keep and transfer to subsequent users information relevant for access and benefit sharing. Moreover, users would be obliged to draw consequences from such information, so ask themselves if they are compliant with the applicable rules. And finally, any breaches of the due diligence obligation would be subject to sanctions. So it's the key provision of this draft regulation. A second important provision is the establishment of a system of EU trusted collections. The objective of this provision is to lower the risk that illegally acquired genetic resources are used in the EU. So this provision means that collections wishing to be included in the register of Union trusted collection would commit to supply fully documented samples of genetic resources to third persons for their use. In addition, users acquiring a genetic resource from a Union trusted collection would be considered to have exercised due diligence as regards the seeking of all necessary information. And finally, the system of EU trusted collections would be particularly relevant or beneficial for academic researchers and for SMEs. So it's a second key provision of this regulation. The third important set of provisions relates to the recognition of best practices. This means that associations of users may request the Commission to recognize a specific combination of procedures, tools, or mechanisms developed by an association as best practice. As a consequence, competent authorities of the Member States would be obliged to consider that the implementation of a recognized best practice by a user reduces risk of non-compliance by that user and justifies a reduction in compliance checks. And finally, formal recognition of best practices would raise legal certainty and lower costs for users and public administration. The fourth key provision of this regulation is the monitoring of user compliance and checkpoints. Basically, users would be obliged to declare at identified points that they complied with their due diligence obligation. And competent authorities of the member states would check on a risk-based approach whether users comply with their obligations under the regulation. And any infringement of the regulation by users would be subject to sanctions by effective, proportionate and dissuasive penalties. So it's basically, I wanted to focus on these four key provisions of this regulation. This regulation is under discussion in the Parliament. INVI committee is the chef de file for this file. It is also under discussion in the Council. In parallel, we have submitted a proposal for the conclusion or for the ratification of the Nagoya Protocol. So, Mr. Chairman, the Commission is at your disposal and at the disposal of the members for any further information or clarification. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks very much. Mrs. Levin.
So, thank you very much. As I said, on behalf of my colleague, Mr. Hodgson, first of all, I'd like to apologize to the colleagues in the committee, but he was unable to attend today because of issues in Scotland. So he offers his sincere apologies to that. So I'm going to read his statement here. So he says, I very much welcome the Commission's proposal seeking to implement the Nagoya Protocol. The Convention on Biological Diversity sets out important principles relating to sovereign rights over genetic resources, including the rights of indigenous and local communities. But it did not, however, clearly spell out how these rights should be implemented. The Nagoya Protocol and the Commission's proposal therefore seeks to address this. Whilst the substance of the protocol does not directly impact upon fisheries management within the EU, the text specifically refers to its main subject areas being key incentives for the conservation of biological diversity. Given that the PESH Committee's responsibilities include the conservation of fisheries resources, it's clear that the protocol falls within the committee's areas of interest. The protocol will allow developing countries and indigenous peoples to reap the benefits of genetic resources over which they hold sovereignty. At times, the PESH Committee stands accused of overriding the interests of these countries, so it's good that this protocol goes some way to redress that balance. And Mr. Hodgson would be grateful for a couple of points of clarification from the Commission. So these are the questions. So Article 13 of the protocol states that each party shall designate a single national focal point, that each party shall designate one or more competent national authorities. I'm going to
slowly, please.
Okay. So, the Article 13 of the Protocol says that each party shall designate a single national focal point and that each party shall designate one or more competent national authorities. A party may designate a single entity to act as both focal point and competent authority. And the Article 6 of the Commission's proposal states that each member state may set up one or more competent national authority and that the Commission will designate a focal point. So the first question is this to be read that the Commission's focal point shall act as a single focal point for all 27 member states in place of national focal points? Or will national focal points also exist at the level below the EU focal point? And the second question, In the broader terms of the Convention on the Biological Diversity, how are sovereign rights defined in relation to marine resources? Are the rights held within the EEZ or within territorial waters? So those were the two questions, and I'd like to also thank the Commission for a very clear explanation on the issues at hand here. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thanks very much. Anybody else?
Por la Comisión.
The Commission, if you want to respond, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the second question, with regard to marine resources, of course, the scope of this regulation is to cover resources under the jurisdiction of the member states of the EU. So this would be, yes, within the territorial waters. And with regard to the second question, maybe I can ask my colleague to answer this specific question on focal points. Thank you.
Thank you, and hello. The Nagoya Protocol requires all parties to the protocol to designate a focal point. So the focal point established at the level of the Commission or EU level will not replace the focal points in all the member states, but the member states will have to designate their own focal points as they will also ratify and become parties to the protocol.
So two levels?
Yes, I think the member states would not be so happy to have just one focal point. Thank you.
¿Alguna otra cuestión?
Anything else? Okay, well, thanks very much indeed. And we will adjourn the meeting here and see you again at 3. We've got the hearing on deep sea fishing, but thank you very much indeed for this morning.